Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, in a few moments, I'm going to talk with the president of the United Way of Pennsylvania. We'll be talking about a program, an initiative called ALICE. ALICE is not a person, but an important program. But how about this? Property tax elimination and gun control, the big topics in Pennsylvania. We'll talk to a couple of the state's leading reporters, and we'll do it after this break.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, we got an action-packed program as they. Joining me, as often is the case, are two of the state's leading reporters. John Micek, he's the editor-in-chief of Pennsylvania Capital Star, and Brad Bumsted, the bureau chief with the Caucus. Both very important news outlets that I urge you to pick up and read when you can. All right, I guess, John Micek, I'll start with you. How can I say this? Here we go again.
Yes. For
at least the 50th time in modern history, we have property tax reform moving center stage. We pay the residents of the state, the property owners, $15 billion in school property taxes. And once again, there's an effort to eliminate weigh-in.
Yeah, that grinding noise you hear is the boulder being pushed slowly toward the top of the hill again. I'm going to watch it probably inevitably roll down the other side. Terry, the Senate Republican Majority Policy Committee held a hearing in York a couple of days ago, last week, to talk about this very topic. A new proposal out there again to get rid of property taxes, as ever, based on a $15 billion tax shift to a higher state income tax, to a likely expanded and higher state sales tax. We've been here a bunch of times before.
Yeah, you guys have written many stories about it.
I mean, came to a vote in 2015 in the state Senate where Democratic Lieutenant Governor Mike Stack cast a tie-breaking no vote. That's as close as it's ever come. Repeated efforts down the years. The challenge, as ever, is making the math work.
Yeah. Well, it came close in 1988 with a vote in the Senate that put it on the ballot.
Is that in modern history?
No, but then it was defeated 3-1 by the state's voters, so it depends how you look at it. But look, the grinding that you hear could also be the grinding of teeth of senior citizens or dentures because they would have their retirement plans taxed.
There's a proposal that would tax people who get state retirement, right?
Exactly. And that's got to be, if that even moves forward, even through committee, a huge issue for senior citizens. And it's ironic because those are the people who would most be helped by property tax reform and who need it if they're on fixed income.
So I get your point. So you may take away something and then tax them another way? Is that
right? It doesn't seem to have too much chance, but...
Well, let me ask you this question. Look, lawmakers who've retired are in the state employee retirement system. Judges at all levels are in the state. They're going to do what? The legislature's going to go ahead, pick it up.
Right. It's self-defeating there, too. It's hard to believe that would pass. But, look, Frank Ryan deserves credit. He's been working on this for...
lawmaker.
Yes, he is. And retired Marine Corps colonel, I believe, and he's worked really hard on this to try to come up with some way to do it. And as everybody looks at this, says there's only two ways you replace that $15 billion. Yeah. One is raise the state income tax. One is raise the state sales tax. And every time they get close to it, when they look at what those rates have to be,
it creates winners and losers, right?
Yeah, and it also takes it off the board because it just gets too high.
Yeah, invariably, Terry, when they have these discussions, you not only can't raise this, rather, if a state sales tax increase has to be accompanied by an increase in the base.
Right.
So at the lower end, Democrats, if you try to touch, say, clothing and food, Democrats will say that's a regressive tax on the poor. If you try to move to the higher end for professional services like attorney's fees or architecture or accountancy or whatever, those constituencies will also step up and say, no way. So there's like this irresistible force, immovable object kind of thing that always happens that inevitably torpedoes any sort of sales tax increase.
Yeah, so the bottom line here, and I'll ask you this before we go to a break and pick up another important topic, gun control. Bottom line, odds it passing in the House or passing the legislature minimal?
It depends on the plan. I mean, if there was something that just reduced property taxes again,
as opposed to eliminate,
maybe it would have some shot. I mean, there's always if you talk to legislators over the years, for decades, they'll say that that's the most important issue for their constituents is property tax reform.
It depends on how it's packaged, but as we were saying before we got on air here, if it was going to happen, it would have happened.
Yeah,
so
good point.
Just trying to be kind that there might be some way to do it with a reduced plan.
All right, after the horrific massacre in Dayton and El Paso, here we go. There's going to be a big debate in the Pennsylvania legislature when it returns about gun control. We already know that debate, when Congress returns, will take place. Gun control, it's on our agenda too.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, John Micek and Brad Bumsted join me. They're two of the state's leading reporters. They've been covering state capitol in Harrisburg for a number of decades. Brad, let me start with you. Here's another sort of here we go again. These horrific massacres, efforts to alter Pennsylvania's gun control law, or I should say laws, are being undertaken. Governor Wolf has been pushed very hard by Democratic lawmakers who say, special session, get the legislature back. He says, no, there's no consensus. I'm going to wait until the legislature returns in September. But he also has a position on gun control, correct?
Well, yes. I mean, he sides with those Democrats who would like to call the special session. He just knows that it's pointless to do that, a practical point of view of his, unless there's some agreement among the caucuses. Why waste the time and money? But look, since the Tree of Life synagogue killings in Pittsburgh in December 2017, there have been 270 deaths across the country from mass shootings. And inevitably, after every incident, gun control people come out and say, now's the time, let's pass gun control, and it doesn't happen. And that's true in Pennsylvania as well. Big protests after Tree of Life. And the fact of the matter is we have a legislature that's, Republican legislature that's sympathetic to gun owners. Maybe people say owned by the NRA. I've never quite bought that. But definitely many of them are hunters, and they have hunters in their district, and they don't like to talk about cutting back on guns. Now, I understand that some of the proposals don't deal with hunting rifles; they're about automatic weapons. But
automatic. Well, let's go to a couple of them. In Pennsylvania, if you buy a gun you go to a store, a shop that sells guns, you've got to go through a background check. But if you sell a gun to me or I sell a gun to Brad or whatever, they're not covered. Do you think there's any possibility that modifying, enhancing, I'll put it this way, the background check in Pennsylvania is something that might pass, given the fact that you're just cleaning up some loopholes?
Yeah, Terry, as we sit here on a Sunday, we're only a few days out from another horrific incident of violence in Philadelphia, where 5 police officers were shot in a shootout with somebody. So Pennsylvania again has now been touched by violence. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that.
Right.
That said, State Senator Pat Brown, the Republican chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, has a bill out that would expand background checks in that very instance in private exchanges, and particularly on long guns, which are also exempted. We've seen Republicans in the State House and Senate pursuing so-called red flag bills.
Yeah, good point.
Which would allow for somebody to go to court to get what's known as an extreme risk protection order.
Right.
If you believe one of your loved ones or law enforcement believes somebody's on the verge of harming themselves or others, you can get a court order to have those weapons seized from them. Second Amendment allies and some civil libertarians have raised due process concerns about that. I think at least a dozen states have those bills, or have those laws rather. And I think in 2 states, in Indiana and Connecticut, there is data supporting the fact that they work. So you have found some Republican consensus in Pennsylvania around those measures. Similarly, on Capitol Hill, U.S. Senator Pat Toomey is once again teaming with Democrat Joe Manchin of West Virginia to try to strengthen background checks. We've seen some movement also on these so-called ERPOs on Capitol Hill as well. What is less clear, though, is whether or not Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will bring those bills to the floor, and also whether President Donald Trump, who has signaled some support and has done so in the past only to back out at the last second under pressure from the NRA, will pull another similar 180.
Terry, I think there's a decent chance, not a great one, for these kind of red flag bills to pass in Pennsylvania.
I was going to say, I mean, as long as there's due process and a court does it, doesn't that move? John makes a great point. There's concern that it would violate the Bill of Rights. You get into that whole issue. Second Amendment. Go ahead.
But I think that due process really doesn't come into play until the second phase of that, where they go to take that gun away for a year as opposed to 30 days. The 30 days, I think it's out of there. And maybe that's a good thing. But look, I think there's a shot at these red flag bills, but I don't think that bills that restrict, ammunition or what kind of guns you can buy are ripe for Pennsylvania at this point. And here's just a thought to throw this out there. Even if you got the strictest gun control measures you could possibly get in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's ranked 12th in terms of strict gun control by the Giffords Law Center. But even if you had the strictest, like California does, people are going to get guns. And here's the reason, is if you do it on a state-by-state basis, you can drive to West Virginia and get a gun. Yeah.
All right,
one quick thing. Governor Tom Wolf was set to also sign some executive orders this past week addressing gun control from the administrative level as well.
Right. Didn't he postpone that?
There was to have been a news conference.
But he'll probably have it next week.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. All right. Coming up, we're going to hear about the program, Alice. I have the president of United Way joining me, and as they say, we'll do that after this break.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, we're now going to turn our attention to a couple of programs that assist the poor, in some cases the working poor, in some cases the poor that are disabled either permanently or temporarily. Joining me to talk about those subjects is Kristen Rotz. She's the president of the United Way of Pennsylvania. So we basically could talk about this in two ways. We have state programs. I want to talk about the elimination of the cash assistance program, and then this very important program called Alice that's an initiative of the United Way, and that's private sector. So we've got two ways to try to help what I call the working poor. So let's start with the cash assistance program. It had been around for a fairly long time. It's $54 million. It was in the state budget. About $200 on average a month to people who are permanently or temporarily disabled. Did that surprise you? That I mean, there have been efforts before to eliminate it, but I was kind of surprised that the legislature passed it.
Yes, we were surprised, and this is a program that truly serves the poorest of the poor, as you mentioned, temporarily and permanently disabled people. As that elimination took place, we recognized that United Way provides some safety net services. A lot of our partners in the community do as well. But there is no direct replacement for that cash assistance that the state had been providing, that roughly $200 a month. People were using that to help pay to do their laundry, to help pay for their rent, to help pay for their prescriptions. So now they're turning to other community-based organizations trying to find help yes, they're trying to find help with their basic needs. So we do see a shift of responsibility to the nonprofit sector.
Yeah. All right. Well, and I don't think the way it looks, the governor kind of reluctantly signed the bill because it had money for millions of dollars for hospitals down in the Southeast, and he was trapped, I think, between the proverbial rock and a hard place, and we'll have to see. But at least for this fiscal year of the state, that program's gone.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's talk about this program called Alice. I had a little joke with it. It's an important program, but Alice is not a person.
No, it is not.
All right. Give us what the acronym stands for, and say it slowly so we can all get it. I have it right in front of me. Go ahead.
Yes. Alice is actually a group of Pennsylvanians. They represent hardworking Pennsylvanians who are going to work every day, but they are earning above the federal poverty level, but not yet enough to pay for all of their essential needs. That's the important thing to know about Alice. The acronym itself stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed.
You got to say that again.
It is a mouthful.
Say that again.
Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed.
You got to explain this now. What do all these words mean?
What this means, Alice, is everyone who, first of all, key criteria is they're working. Second criteria
so they don't fall into that category that some people complain about, where we're giving money to people who shirk their responsibilities and don't work. Go ahead.
That is correct. The other facet here is income. They are earning an income. They're not earning an income that sustains their basic needs. And then the third piece of this is about assets. It's about the fact that Alice does not have many or any assets. They don't have savings. They don't own property. And they are just struggling and living one emergency away from poverty. Alice is very diverse across our state. There's not one particular example of Alice. Alice is everywhere. Alice is many different household configurations. I
have a question here. In the data that you provided, you say here 37% of households are struggling to survive?
Yes, it's a total of 37% in Pennsylvania. It's 24% who live above the federal poverty level and below the Alice survival threshold. And then there's another 13% who live below the federal poverty level.
Wow. All right, let's run to a break. When we come back, I want to continue to talk about this, but there's also something else. I'm going to use a number, not 911, but 211. What's that all about? Kristen will explain that when we return.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Kristen Rotz joins me. She's the president of the United Way of Pennsylvania. We're talking about a very, very important initiative, and I want to emphasize again that this program is a way to help people who need the help, but it's not government money. I'm correct about that, right?
Yes, we're trying to tell the story of working Pennsylvanians who have various barriers in front of them and need some help to bridge the gap to be more financially stable. However, there are a lot of public policy decisions that our policymakers have to make every day, which impact Alice, and that includes what they're investing in high-quality childcare. Yep. It includes even setting eligibility standards for programs that provide assistance to people.
I mean, we've got people who fall into this income category who have to have child care. They're working, but they need child care. They may need transportation. So this is sort of things that we normally wouldn't think about as we assess what to do about helping these people, correct?
It is, and it's really important to think about them right now in the condition of Pennsylvania's current economy, which by a lot of measures is humming around. Unemployment rate is very low. There are, however, a lot of employers who are looking for a qualified workforce. We have among the Alice population people who have skills and have demonstrated that they know how to go to work every day and be responsible and show up to provide the service that their employer expects, but they may need a different set of skills to help them get into the jobs that are competitive and family-sustaining employment in the current economy.
All right, before we go to another subject, what's the connection between what you want to do and the horrific situation with opioid addiction, even though the states all over our country and the federal government, massive efforts to cut back, and there is indeed some evidence that opioid, the addiction is being cut back. But what's the relationship between this program and that?
We actually took a look in our data. We have a very long report that looked at a lot of different data across the state, and we checked out the rate of opioid deaths in counties across the Commonwealth and lined that up with where Alice lives. Alice lives absolutely everywhere in every community. What we found is that the rates of opioid overdose and deaths are no higher in communities with higher proportions of Alice than others. So what that tells us is this is not necessarily an income-driven problem. It also tells us that if a family that is Alice faces the challenges of the opioid crisis, if they're trying to support someone with an addiction, they're financially in a more tenuous place to be able to allow that to happen.
All right, let's talk a little bit about, we all know about 911. You have an emergency, but I don't think anyone knows, and I'm hearing it for the first time, you have a number, it's 211. What's the purpose of 211?
211 is a Health and Human Services information and referral line, which is now available across the state of Pennsylvania. And it is for anyone, regardless of income level. If you need help with something, you can call 211. We answer a lot of calls on housing assistance and assistance with utilities, but we can also help people find programs to support their aging parents. We can help them find summer food programs.
Hold on, let me stop you. This is great.
Yeah.
So housing, does that mean if somebody's having a housing problem, you can put them in touch with people who can presumably assist them in solving their housing situation?
Yes. We have a database of resources that are available throughout communities. It's not just government-funded programs. There's also things that churches and other nonprofits do. So, the qualifier here is we do not have enough services to meet all the need in Pennsylvania right now. But if you are looking for help, 211 is the easiest place to turn to find out what's available in your community.
So I presume we're talking about it could be public services that are available and or it could be private sector services that are available. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
So, is it being used?
It is being used. We had 200,000 unique contacts to 211 last year.
How many?
200,000. And we are looking to grow. We want people to contact us by phone, by text. People can text their zip code to 898-211 if they're looking for assistance, and we'll be able to send them some referrals by text.
All right, and quickly, how long has it been operational?
Well, it's been operating in various places across the state for a little over 10 years, but only within the last few months have we gotten to the point where we have statewide coverage.
All right, well, I want to thank you for coming in. Yeah. This has been a great update, and we'll see, and you can keep us posted on the progress of Alice. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.